Ethan sat in the small command chair of the ship as the black sky stretched before him. The stars looked calm, but he knew danger waited in the dark. Claire stood beside him, reading the last message they had received. Her hands shook, but her eyes stayed sharp. The words were clear. A new battle was coming, and the humans were being pulled into it. Nobody in the galaxy knew much about humans. They were seen as weak and untested. Most of the larger powers ignored them, yet Ethan and his small crew had been ordered to fly close to the edge of a war that had consumed countless worlds. The enemy was feared by all. People spoke of them with dread, but never spoke too long. And now there were whispers of something else, something the enemy had by their side. Claire lowered the tablet and said it again. The Grimspawn have an ally. Her voice was low but steady. Ethan had heard the words before. Every time he did, the air seemed to grow heavier. Even the strongest alien warriors in the coalition refused to explain what that ally was, so they only warned others not to face it. The human crew was small. Beside Ethan and Claire, there was Jason, the pilot, and Megan, who kept the ship running. They were not soldiers. They were explorers who had been caught in the middle of something far greater than them. Still, they knew they could not turn away now. The ship drifted near the remains of a battle. Broken metal floated in the void. Some of it burned with dim orange light. The sight made Megan whisper under her breath. Jason kept the ship steady while Ethan searched the wreckage with sharp eyes. None of them spoke much. They all felt it. Something wrong had passed through this place. Claire broke the silence. She pointed to a piece of hull drifting by. Marks ran across it, deep cuts that no weapon should have made. Ethan frowned. Those marks looked more like the work of claws than any beam or blade. He leaned closer to the screen and saw more signs of the same thing. Ships torn apart not by machines but by something alive. Jason asked what could have done it. Nobody answered. The question sat heavy in the air. They did not want to say the word ally again. It felt like calling the thing closer. The radio crackled. A weak voice came through, broken but desperate. It was a survivor. Ethan ordered Jason to follow the signal. They found a small escape pod half hidden behind a ruined ship. Megan worked fast to pull the survivor inside. He was pale and shaking, his eyes wide with terror. He grabbed Ethan's arm and spoke with a voice that cracked and broke. He said he had seen it. He said it moved faster than sight. He said it was not like the enemy. It was worse. His words poured out until his breath failed. Ethan tried to calm him, but the man only kept repeating the same thing. The ally is real. The ally does not serve, it rules. The survivor's voice faded, and he passed out. The crew looked at one another in silence. Claire's hand shook harder now. Jason turned back to the controls, his face pale. Megan tried to steady her breath. Ethan felt a weight pressing on his chest. They had all heard the stories, but hearing the words from a survivor made them real. The stars outside no longer looked calm. They looked sharp and cold. Ethan knew the mission had changed. It was no longer about watching from the edge. It was about learning what this ally was, and whether humanity could survive its shadow. The survivor rested in the small medical bay of the ship. His breathing was weak but steady. Claire stood near him, her eyes fixed on the monitor. She kept hearing his words in her head. The ally does not serve, it rules. She whispered them once under her breath, as if speaking them would help her understand, but the meaning only grew darker. Ethan sat in the command chair again. His hands gripped the arms as he tried to think. Every report they had found told the same story. Powerful fleets crushed in silence, soldiers broken in seconds, and now a man too frightened to even describe what he had seen. Ethan wondered if humans had made a mistake stepping into this war, but he knew it was too late to turn away. Jason brought up a map of nearby systems. Signals of destroyed ships lit the screen like wounds across the stars. He pointed to one system where the signals were strongest. Ethan nodded. If they wanted answers, that was where they had to go. Megan adjusted the engines and the ship began its slow push through the void. Aim passed in silence. The crew tried to rest, but no one slept well. Claire kept reading the fragments of intercepted transmissions. Her skill with language let her piece together broken messages. One message stood out. It spoke of fear not only from the coalition but from the enemy itself. They did not speak with pride about their ally. They spoke with worry. They whispered about control slipping away. When she showed the message to Ethan, he leaned forward. The enemy was afraid of the very thing they had brought into the war. He asked her to keep looking for more. If they could learn how the enemy feared it, maybe they could understand what it was. Hours later, the ship reached the edge of the chosen system. Wreckage filled the black. Entire fleets had fallen here. The crew grew quiet as the screen showed the scale of destruction. Claire covered her mouth. Megan whispered that no army could do this alone. Ethan agreed. This was the work of the Ally. As they moved through the field of broken ships, Jason slowed the craft. Signals of life appeared, faint but real. Ethan ordered them to follow. They found another escape pod, cracked open but still working. Inside was a soldier with armor torn apart. He was barely alive. They pulled him aboard. The man opened his eyes and looked at Ethan. His lips trembled as he spoke. He said he had fought many battles, but nothing like this. Said shadows cut through their lines before they could even fire. Said men froze when they heard its steps. It did not strike like a machine. It struck like a beast that enjoyed the kill. Then his eyes rolled back and he passed out. Megan stared at his broken armor. Deep claw marks scarred the plates. She traced them with her hand and shivered. Claire turned away, holding her arms close. Ethan stood silent. The image of a beast returned to his mind, something that was not bound by reason or mercy. He felt the weight of the survivor's words again. It rules. Jason broke the silence. If the enemy cannot control it, maybe it will turn on them. Ethan nodded, but his face stayed hard. He knew that if it could break the enemy, it could break anyone. Even them. The ship drifted deeper into the system. Signals of movement flashed on the radar. Something alive was near. Ethan ordered full silence across the ship. They watched the screens as a shape passed in the distance. It moved with grace, faster than any craft they had seen. It vanished into the dark before they could study it. The crew held their breath. They had not seen its face, but they knew. The Ally was close. The ship moved through the dark zone, with only faint lights marking its path. Ethan sat in silence, his eyes fixed on the screen as the sensors struggled to read what lay ahead. The system was quiet, but the silence felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Claire stood near him with a tablet in her hands, reading every signal that came through. She wrote notes, her face pale but steady. Jason kept his hands tight on the controls. He slowed the ship as they passed broken hulks of old stations. Megan worked on the engines, her tools clicking as she forced herself to focus. None of them wanted to think about the shape they had seen in the distance, yet it followed them in their thoughts, a shadow pressing against their minds. The further they traveled, the stranger the wreckage became. Some ships were split open in ways no weapon could explain. Deep scars ran along the hulls, as if giant claws had torn them apart. Claire pointed to one screen where the sensors showed strange residue along a broken cruiser. It was not metal or energy. It was organic. Ethan frowned and told Jason to circle closer. The sight made the crew fall into silence. It looked like blood spread across steel. They pushed deeper into the system. Signals of life flickered and died too quickly to trace. It felt as if something wanted to be seen but not caught. Ethan ordered full scans of the ruins. Claire found fragments of logs stored in broken beacons. She pieced them together. The messages told of soldiers sent to capture something, but none returned. The last words written were desperate. They said the Ally was not created, it was found. Everyone looked at each other when she read it aloud. The thought struck hard. If the enemy had only found this thing, then it was older and darker than they had imagined.
Oh.
Megan said nothing, but her hands shook as she fixed the wires on her console. Jason whispered that maybe it was better left where it had been. Ethan only said they had to know the truth. The galaxy needed to know. Hours passed before they reached the heart of the system. There they found ruins of stone structures floating among the stars. They were massive, far older than any fleet. Time had broken them, but they still stood, cold and silent. Claire whispered that they looked like temples. Ethan ordered scans. The readings were strange, filled with energy that did not match any known power. As they drifted closer, the lights of the ship flickered. The crew froze as shadows moved across the glass of the viewport. Ethan ordered the ship steady. Claire looked out and saw something move across the ruins. It was tall, thin, and silent. Its steps were slow but powerful. Her heart raced as she watched it vanish into the stone walls. Jason asked if it was the Ally. Ethan said nothing. He knew it was. They'd come too close. The creature was watching them. Megan tried to hide her fear by checking the engine again, but her hands could not stop shaking. Claire pressed her tablet against her chest and whispered that she had seen its face. Ethan turned to her. She said it looked almost human. For a long moment, the crew did not speak. The thought filled them with dread. If the ally was tied to humans in any way, then everything they knew about the war had changed. Ethan told them to prepare for anything. The ship pulled back slowly from the ruins. Yet as they turned away, a shadow followed. The ally had seen them, and it was not going to let them go. The crew stayed tense as the ship moved through the ruins. Ethan felt the weight of eyes on them, though the sensors showed nothing. Claire kept scanning, her fingers racing across the tablet, but no clear signal appeared. She looked up at Ethan and whispered that it was close. He already knew. Without warning, the alarms rang. Jason shouted that something had locked onto them. A massive force pulled the ship downward toward the ruins. Megan fought with the engines, sparks flying from her panel. The ship groaned as if crushed by invisible hands. Then, with a sudden jolt, the pull stopped. Silence returned, but it felt even heavier. Out of the dark stone corridors, a shape emerged. Tall, broad, and silent. The screen shook as the sensors tried to read it but failed. Claire looked with her own eyes and froze. The being was covered in shadow, but its outline was clear. Its arms were long, its stride calm but certain. When the light caught its face for an instant, her heart stopped. The features looked human. Megan whispered that it could not be real. Jason swore under his breath, his hands gripping the controls until his knuckles turned white. Ethan forced himself to stay steady. He asked Claire what she saw. She said the truth. It looked like one of them. The figure walked across the ruins with slow power, dragging a piece of broken metal as if it weighed nothing. Then it lifted its head. The screens went dark. Every system on the ship shut down. The crew sat in pitch black as the sound of heavy steps echoed through the hull. Claire's breath quickened. Jason reached for controls that no longer worked. Megan whispered a prayer. Ethan rose to his feet, waiting. Suddenly the power returned. The screens lit up. The figure stood at the edge of the ruins, staring straight at them. Its eyes glowed faintly. Not cold like the enemy, but alive with something far older. Ethan felt a chill run through him. The ally was no weapon. It was something born of life, twisted and bound. He spoke quietly, telling the crew to stay calm. A new alarm broke the silence. Outside the ruins, fleets clashed. Ships filled the black sky with fire and smoke. The enemy had arrived with full force. The coalition struggled to hold the line, but the moment the ally stepped forward, all fire ceased. Every soldier on both sides froze. Even from the ship, the humans could see the terror across the battlefield. It was not only fear from the coalition. The enemy itself pulled back, ships halting their fire. The ally was not their servant, it was their master. Claire watched the battle unfold and shook her head. She said the enemy never truly controlled it. It only unleashed it. Ethan realized she was right. The Grimspawn had chained it, but chains cannot hold forever. Out. It moved with its own will, and its will was power. The ally turned and began to walk into the battle. Every ship around it shuddered as if struck by fear. Then, for one moment, it stopped. Its head turned toward the small human vessel. Ethan felt his heart pound in his chest. Claire gasped. Megan and Jason could not move. The being looked at them, and in its eyes they saw something more than rage. They saw recognition. The ally stood still as fire raged across the sky. For the first time, it did not move as a beast. It hesitated. Claire whispered that it was responding to them. Ethan stared back, his mind racing with the truth. This was not alien. This was tied to them, and it knew. The sky burned with fire as fleets clashed across the system. Explosions lit the void, but the center of every eye was on the ally. The giant form stood still, silent, and for a moment the war itself seemed to wait on its choice. Ethan gripped the command chair, his jaw tight. Claire leaned forward, her eyes locked on the screen. Megan and Jason stayed frozen, their breath caught in their throats. The ally stepped forward at last. Ships broke apart around it without a single strike. Weapons turned silent. Even the enemy that had once called it their weapon pulled back in fear. Ethan spoke low but firm. said they could not let this be the end. Humans had to stand where others could not. Claire turned to him, her face pale but her voice steady. She said maybe it listened to them because it was part of them. Ethan did not know if she was right, but he knew they had no choice but to try. The ship moved closer to the battlefield. Jason steered with a trembling hand, pushing past wrecks and fire. Megan forced power from failing engines, sparks lighting her station. The closer they came, the heavier the air felt, as if the presence of the ally weighed on their very hearts. Claire reached for the radio and began to speak. Her voice was soft at first, but then stronger. She called out not as an enemy, but as a human calling to another. The ally stopped in its path. Its head turned again toward their ship. Fleets around it froze, both sides staring as silence fell across the field. Claire kept speaking. She told it they were not its chains. She told it they were of the same world. Her words shook, but they carried through the dark. Ethan stood beside her and added his voice. He said it did not have to serve. It could choose. For a long moment nothing moved, and the alley's steps grew slower. Its head lifted high as if breaking from some hold. The glow in its eyes shifted. It's no longer empty rage, but something that looked like memory. The enemy fired in panic, trying to strike it down, but their weapons bent away as if the void itself protected it. The ally roared, a sound so deep the stars seemed to tremble. And then it turned on the ones who had tried to bind it. With one strike, it tore through the enemy's flagship. Entire lines of their fleet broke apart. Soldiers screamed and fled. The coalition forces held their ground in shock. For the first time, they saw the enemy running from their own weapon, sky lit with fire as the ally crushed ship after ship, moving with fury but no longer blind. Inside the human vessel, the crew held on as shock waves rattled them. Claire's eyes filled with tears as she whispered that it had chosen. Ethan gripped her shoulder and nodded. Jason shouted that the enemy was retreating. Megan smiled for the first time in days, her hands still on the burning engines. Together they watched the tide of battle turn. When the last enemy ship fled into the dark, the ally stood among the ruins. Its chest rose and fell like a living being. Then it turned once more toward the humans. The glow in its eyes dimmed, but did not vanish. For a breath it only watched them. Then, with slow steps, it moved back into the void, leaving silence behind. The battlefield was quiet. The coalition fleets hailed the humans with voices of awe and fear. They had seen what no one else dared face. They had seen humans speak to the ally and turn it. Ethan sat back in the chair, his chest heavy, but proud. Claire whispered that the galaxy would never see them the same way again. In that moment, every power across the stars knew the truth. Humans were no longer weak newcomers. They were deathworlders. And the ally that froze alien warriors in terror now stood with them,